Hello, my name is Jason Shelton, and today, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whenever you're listening to this. I hope you are having a great day and wonderful one. My name is Jason Shelton. I will be your host of Sports Digest, a sports podcast produced by yours truly. And in this first inaugural episode, I'll be discussing about the Tennessee Titans and recapping the 2024 NFL Draft. The name of this episode is called Recapping the 2024 NFL Draft. So now, this is where I will explain part of this awesome new project that I will enjoyably make. So, in this podcast, I'll basically be talking about the essence of a sports, more specifically sports, about the Tennessee Titans and how I would feel when the Titans do certain things. And Sports Digest is basically where I will explain sports to you for your ears only. No pun intended. And I explain that keeping this simple and what I continue to cover in this fantastic world of sports knowledge is that I can really explain it pretty well. And you gotta realize that this episode is gonna be no different from any other ones that I produce in the future. And you might be hearing a cat. That is my cat being a little loud. But then again, I'm recording this really lately, and I got to edit this whole thing, and beforehand I think this will be a really fun project for me to edit down and resize and make sure that the audio sounds terrific, but keeping it sports related. Sports Digest is a great way to listen to all the different things about sports. Now I'll be continuing the Sports Digest episode 1, recapping the 2024 NFL Draft. Now, the 2024 NFL Draft was incredible for most teams, but iffy for most. I think that the Tennessee Titans did a pretty decent job drafting. If you didn't know, when they selected 7th overall, they took Latham out of the University of Alabama, and that pick right there was pretty good to improve their offensive line. After the Latham pick, they went straight to defensive tackle out of Texas, T'Vondre Sweat. In the 3rd round, the Titans ended up they actually didn't have a 3rd round pick. It's a trick question. In the 4th round, they went with the linebacker out of North Carolina, Cedric Gray. In the 5th round, they took a wide receiver out of Tulane in Jha'quan Jackson. In the 6th round, they took a cornerback from Louisville, Jarvis Brownlee Jr. In the 7th round, they took 2 players. Once again, a really defensive-heavy draft that they went through. In the 7th round, they took defensive back, now linebacker, James Williams, out of Miami. He used to play safety from Miami. And edge rusher from the University of Michigan, Jaylen Harrell. I'll be breaking down these picks, starting with number 70, which is J.C. Latham. We picked him 7th overall from the University of Alabama. Initially, it was a really good pick for the Titans in the way that they can use him to improve their offensive line, and how him and now head coach Brian Callahan is going to use him along the offensive line. Now, I haven't watched a full comprehensive review of J.C. Latham, but from what I've seen from film study and how he just absolutely just is a torque player, which I'll explain what that means in just a second. And what a torque player does is get their knees to drive past the field when you're an offensive lineman. And when you're a 6'8" offensive lineman from the University of Alabama, you tend to play each side. He's probably going to be playing left tackle for the Titans. JC is. And he's going to be, with Peter Skoronski, probably Lloyd Cushenberry, and right guard's probably going to be Brunskill. Right tackle is probably going to be like a Nicholas Petit-Frere or a Dylan Radins. But overall, the line looks really good for the Titans. They got 5 incredibly good starters, and it's a really balanced group if you really think about it. Plus, they are getting mentored and coached by one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL, and Bill Callahan. Fun fact, that's Brian Callahan's father, coaching the O-line. League sources say that he's one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL, which I would tend to agree with, because a lot of executives and writers know more than I do. And I think pairing JC up with Peter Skoronski to knock down that left side is going to be crucial to their success, at least in the running game, with Tajay Spears and Tony Pollard. And I'm going to touch up in a minute what I think about how I feel about that pick. Just 1 second. So this is really a double-edged sword. No, but this is one of the better picks I've seen. This reminds me of the Taylor Lewan pick back in 2014. And yes, I've been a fan for about 15, 16 years of the Titans, so I've basically lived through the 2-14, 3-13, last year's abysmal 6-11, and the firing of Mike Vrabel. I'll deep dive into that later too on this episode of Sports Digest. Make sure you subscribe and follow on Spotify. Thank you. But anyways, back to the Titans. Before I digress, I think that their offensive line, while it can permit problems, it's very deep. Like, the amount of sheer depth that they have at offensive line, like at guard, like with Brunskill and Dylan Radins, and having Lloyd Cushenberry signing him over, pieces that you can break up and put into this roster. But to include, like J.C. Latham is one of, if not one of the best tackle prospects coming into this draft, and he will definitely bolster the O-line and great pass protection. I don't think he's going to play on the right side. I mentioned earlier he's going to be left tackle. He is going to be the left tackle. We'll just see how that plays out come training camp. But he's looked very solid from what I've seen so far, and he's really driving his legs, which is what you want in a tackle. You want an offensive lineman that can drive their feet flat, really push on, as Coach Callahan would call it, Bertha. There's a run machine Titans training camp called Bertha. It's basically what Bill Callahan uses to, it's like a sled. Imagine like a football sled, and you just go after it. That's what Bill Callahan invented, is the Bertha machine, which is exactly what I just explained. A big football sled. 2 different words. Going off to a great start. Latham was really, it was either him or Joe Alt that I hoped that they would pick, and they went with the second best tackle on the board because the Chargers took Joe Alt. And with Latham, Some of the downsides to Latham, though, is his length, but I don't think that's a problem because you can have really short arms as a tackle. You could have a better grip on edge rushers whenever you're, put your fists together and try to block. But overall, this offensive line is shaping to be pretty good. Now I'm going to move to Texas defensive tackle T'Vondre Sweat. Now, personally, this is an iffy pick. I don't know if I would have picked him if I was Rand Carthon, but if I was Rand Carthon, I will say one thing about T'Vondre Sweat is a good idea pick where you can match him up great with Jeffrey Simmons and Sebastian Joseph Day. Don't forget about that. Acquiring Joseph Day from free agency back in March. And it's a really good learning opportunity for T'Vondre Sweat to learn from no other than Big Jeff, one of the best defensive tackles in our game. And he shows some proven upside, but he hasn't been on the field that much because he was hindering an injury. And with injuries, you can't really predict a player's future with their injury. But I will say about T'Vondre Sweat, he has a pretty good, bull rush abilities, but he's primarily a run stopper. And him and Jeffrey Simmons are going to be pretty good on the defensive line front. Him, Joseph Day, and Simmons. Because those three can just teach Sweat, how to block shed and all that defensive tackle stuff. Now, once their next pick, I'm pretty sure their next pick was, linebacker from North Carolina, Cedric Gray. Now, Cedric Gray is a very good coverage linebacker. Getting a reminder of the Rashaan Evans, maybe not that type of talent, but definitely seen some similarities between Cedric Gray and Rashaan Evans in the way that they are really good coverage linebackers. And, linebackers, whenever you play in a 3-4, which is pretty sure what the Titans are going to be doing, two of those linebackers stay, in coverage. One usually is a man linebacker or a will linebacker, or we call him a Mike linebacker. It's basically your main linebacker. It's your main backer, just like Rashaan Evans was, or Jaylen Brown. This is years ago, by the way. Rashaan Evans and Jaylen Brown from 2018, 2019, 2017. That era Titans. But besides the point, Cedric Gray is going to fit right into that mold of Rashaan Evans, Jaylen Brown-ish. Also, he's playing alongside Kenneth Murray, which is the replacement for Azeez Al-Shire, 2024. And that, I think Cedric Gray could do really good things for us. He's definitely a rotating piece between him and Caleb Murphy, or him and Jack Gibbons, sorry. It's Jack Gibbons and Kenneth Murray right now, starting linebacker. They'll compete for snaps here in training camp come July, but I think that Cedric Gray can really, if he really starts to improve and lock on to just the role of being a middle linebacker or a will linebacker, he'll have tremendous upside and probably take over the starting position within a couple seasons. Because the thing with linebackers, they're basically the quarterback of defense. That might not make sense, but I'll explain that in just a minute. Yeah, so the referral of linebackers on defense. I explain the linebackers to be a quarterback on defense because they are basically the ears and eyes for the defense. They basically can switch coverage. Like if you're going to cover 2-man, you can switch up to a cover 3 zone, or any other different coverages. You can quickly alert defensive linemen and outside edge rushers. And I think Cedric Gray could do a really good job in being poised at being the linebacker that Titans fans have been wanting for a little bit. Kind of like what we saw in Azeez Al-Shaair last year, but Azeez Al-Shaair is more of a man linebacker. He's getting his opportunity in Houston right now, which I'm happy for him. Azeez, if you're somehow listening to this, then I'm proud of what you're doing and what you're going to continue to do. I have the utmost respect for you. And Azeez really just flew to where the ball was, and he was there each time, he making tackles left and right. And him and David Long Jr., were just really good like that. Very instinctive players, really knew the game. They really did. And now it's up to Kenneth Murray and Jack Gibbons. And hopefully Cedric Gray can, be a rotating piece, because he is, after all, a fourth-round pick from North Carolina. But I think that's where I find his upside, is being, that rotational, sub him in real quick for a couple downs, and, he can make a play on the ball. So now we'll go over the fifth-round pick, pretty sure. I'm trying to think right now, but I'm pretty sure the fifth-round pick is wide receiver from Tulane. Is it Jha'quan Jackson? Do a quick search if it's Jha'quan Jackson. Jha'quan Jackson was the 6th-round pick. So, so their 5th-round pick was, or 4th-round pick was Cedric Gray, which I just gave a brief analysis for. And basically, he's just going to be that inside linebacker that's going to replace what Azeez Al-Shaair was going to be. And I think Cedric Gray is going to fill in that role pretty well. He's going to play with Kenneth Murray and Jack Gibbons. So I think he's going to do a really good job of, rotating himself into that defense, have the Titans need to rely on that third backer that they so desperately need. Their 5th-round pick. Now, I'm all for depth. It's one of the things that is most important whenever you're doing an NFL roster. Depth is one of the key things. And I'm a big fan of the next 2 picks. It is Jarvis Brownlee Jr. It is a cornerback from Louisville, Kentucky, University of Louisville. And it really puts a lot of depth onto the Titans' quarterback room, which is currently, I'm pretty sure, Caleb Farley, Chidobe Awuzie, L'Jarius Sneed, Roger McCreary, Jarvis Brownlee Jr. Now, any other, Elijah Molden, even though Molden is more of a safety player, but I'm going to put him at that DB/safety category. And from what I think of Brownlee is that he can be a really good special teams player and, be like a gunner on special teams, because let's be honest, he might not start right away, but he has time to, progress. Same thing with, they got another undrafted free agent, Gabe Judy Lawley, who used to play at the University of Tennessee. And he's also a decent man-to-man corner, just like Brownlee Jr. is. And I would compare him to kind of like a Rasul Douglas type. Might be too high of a comparison, but who cares? It's just a good depth piece to have a corner for Jarvis Brownlee and what he does. I'm pretty sure he had a really good year at Louisville too, but that's a really good depth piece for the Titans to add on, because you can never go wrong with having too much secondary depth. And that's one of the main things in football, is having enough depth for every position, not just corner, but wide receiver, tight ends, offensive line, what you name it. Name position, you need depth everywhere. It's just a great depth piece. And same thing with round 6. Jha'quan Jackson. Jha'quan Jackson is basically, he's a speed threat, and he's also going to be like in that outside edge. Like, he's going to be wide receiver maybe 6 or 7. But he was teammates with Tajay Spears at Tulane. Maybe they picked him because of that. But they might incorporate Jha'quan Jackson into their lineup. It really depends on how they do in preseason, though, because rookies tend to show out preseason or sit out. Some sit out, some show out. And I think Jha'quan Jackson could be a really good deep threat down the hall for the future. Gives another weapon for Will Levis to look forward to. Just like our wide receiver depth chart right now is DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, Nick Westbrook-Akine, Jha'quan Jackson, Traylon Burks. It's pretty deep. But Jha'quan Jackson's, he's going to have to compete with, probably Kyle Phillips, maybe Traylon Burks, maybe Mason Kinsey. He could also compete with Kearis Jackson, who also has a spot on the roster, but all depends on how they do. Also, this is also just pure speculation for what they're going to do and what they're going to entail come training camp in 28 days. So, the second to last pick for the Titans, round 7, pick number 242, is James Williams, safety from Miami. He's no longer a safety, by the way. He is now a linebacker, kind of like how Isaiah Simmons is. If you understand that, what I mean is Isaiah Simmons was a safety converted linebacker, and now James Williams, the quote-unquote safety from Miami, is a converted safety to linebacker. He switched positions, basically, and the point of that is I think it's just his length, like he's 6'4", 215, pretty sure. And that is very tall for a safety. It's extremely tall. But he's going to make the position change to linebacker, and he thinks that it's a really good decision. But besides the point, that's still a very tall. That's really tall, 6'4", 215. It's really good measurables for a safety or a linebacker. Like he's kind of like the Isaiah Simmons type to switch from safety to linebacker, like I said previously. So I wonder how the Titans defensive coordinator is going to list him at probably linebacker 4 behind Cedric Gray. But, he could also be very useful on special teams and playing punt coverage for the Titans. That's mainly what you would expect for someone in the 7th round or, undrafted free agents. Now their last pick, pick number 252 overall, Jaylen Harrell, defensive end from Michigan. I'll talk about him in just one moment. Now, their last pick, round 7, 252, Jaylen Harrell. He's an edge rusher from the University of Michigan. National champions, by the way. And Jaylen Harrell, to me, is another really good depth piece. I mean, he's going to have to really do really good to compete for a starting job. Like right now, I think the Titans' depth at edge or outside linebacker, for some of you that don't understand what an edge is basically the outside linebacker that's going to come after the quarterback and sack him. he's going to have to compete with Harold Landry, Arden Key, Rashad Weaver, and possibly Caleb Murphy. I'm saying possibly Caleb Murphy because Caleb Murphy was the undrafted free agent that just popped off last year and made a really resounding impact to the Titans. But he could just, switch in and out with, Arden Key or Rashad Weaver. That's probably his top priorities, to just be in the rotation by itself. And he can really get after the quarterback. Like some of the highlights I've watched of Jaylen Harrell, and will continue to watch because that's the only thing I can pretty much watch, is just highlights of him at Michigan. But I've seen some really good things. Like his get off is pretty good. It's pretty good from an outside linebacker. I don't know where Denard Wilson, the Titans defensive coordinator, by the way, is going to put him on the left side or the right side, but I would put him primarily opposite of Harold Landry, because if you let's say Arden Key goes down and Rashad Weaver can't play for some reason, you got Jaylen Harrell, which you could put him opposite of Harold Landry, and the defensive line of what would be Landry, Simmons, Sebastian Joseph Day, and Jaylen Harrell. That's a pretty good tandem for, opposing quarterbacks and opposing offensive linemen. They're going to have a big problem trying to shut that down immediately. As I'm approaching 29 minutes on this first episode of Sports Digest. As I was saying, Jaylen Harrell, really good get-off guy. And seeing what he's done, hey, it's a really good thing. Like I've said before, I'm going to say it again. It's a great thing to have depth in the NFL, because if you don't have depth, you're not going to win championships. You're not going to win any Super Bowls. Competition and depth are the two biggest allies for the NFL, pretty much. So let's move on from the NFL draft. And right now, I kind of want to talk about Brian Callahan and how I feel about him taking the job literally kind of from Mike Vrabel's hands. Now, I should be past this. Mike Vrabel, if you didn't know already, he's been fired since January 9th. And it kind of is a somber ending to what was an incredible run, going back from the time he started in 2018. And I remember the first games, that whole season of him taking over from Mike Mularkey, him thinking he could revitalize Marcus Mariota's career, and, adding Matt LaFleur and Dean Pease. He kind of sort of had a pretty good first year, going 9-7, which was typical for the Titans, because they went 9-7, I think 3 or 4 years in a row, which is kind of nuts. If you really think about it, they went 9-7 from 2016 to 2019. That's a random fun fact. Also, what you should know is that Mike Vrabel got so much shit from Dean Pease and Matt LaFleur. So he decided to part ways with Matt LaFleur the following year. Decided to hire internally and get Arthur Smith. Now we're moving to 2019. 2019, Vrabes shows out, goes on Bussing with the Boys, which is my favorite podcast. He said he cut his dick off for a Super Bowl, which is very funny. Had a really good laugh with that. And 2019 was the same year that the Titans went to the AFC Championship game. And that is where, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, once again, just I think that's when they won their first Super Bowl in that Chiefs dynasty. Because let's be honest, the Chiefs are on their own league, and they're on their own terms. They are phenomenal. Chiefs are best team in the NFL for a reason. They have 3 Super Bowl rings right now. Pretty sure under Mahomes. It's nuts, by the way. Anyways, 2020, start to, they got their first home playoff game since 2008, which is a nice thing. But they're going up against the Ravens. Lose to the Ravens at home. Devastated. 2021 rolls around. They pick up Julio Jones, pair him with A.J. Brown. God forbid I say A.J. Brown and Julio Jones again, because they were both really good, talented wide receivers for the time. Then the Bengals game comes around. It was cold Nashville night. Lost because of Ryan Tannehill threw an interception to Chidobe Awuzie, which is ironic because Chidobe Awuzie is a Titan now. But Tannehill threw it into triple coverage trying to go to Nick Westbrook-Akine, and it was one of the worst throws I've ever seen. And I remember being shivering at that game. It was one of the coldest nights I've ever experienced. And it was the first playoff game I've been to as a Titans fan. And it was just one of the coldest, darkest nights. But the stadium was so loud before the game even started. And that was the game that Derrick Henry returned from his foot injury, from his 5th metatarsal surgery. And we had to wait for him to get better for 11 weeks, pretty sure it was. But 2021 was our last positive season. And ever since then, 2022 didn't do so good. 2023, it was kind of an up and down year where you have Will Levis taking over Ryan Tannehill's job, and he's done that successfully. I have no doubt in my mind that Will Levis is going to start this year, which is going to be really fascinating for a lot of us to watch. I say that because Will Levis, a full year with Will Levis is going to be really fun, especially with Brian Callahan calling the plays, calling the shots, rather, because he's an offensive-minded head coach, unlike Vrabel. Vrabel was a defensive-minded coach from the beginning. He's been in the league. He was a linebacker for Ohio State, played for the Patriots for a long time with Tom Brady, and then became a head coach for Ohio State. Then Amy pounced on the opportunity to hire him, and then this past year decided to let him go. Well, Rand Carthon decided to let him go, but that was ultimately Miss Adams' decision to let him go, and decided to hire Brian Callahan. Now, Brian Callahan used to be the offensive coordinator for the Bengals. He used to be the offensive coordinator for the Broncos when they had Peyton Manning. He also is one of the better play designers for, young and incoming quarterbacks. Heck, he had Joe Burrow the past 4 years. How else is he gonna bring but greatness to Will Levis? He's gonna change his dynamics, and I'm gonna see how that works. That's gonna be a pretty cool thing to see. But anyways, I'll be unpacking how Will Levis can have a really successful second year under Brian Callahan, not Mike Vrabel. Now, I believe that Bill Callahan will do a pretty decent job with leading the Titans in his first year. No, the Titans aren't going to make the playoffs his first year. You are delusional if you think they're going to make the playoffs his first year. He's not going to make the playoffs, plain and simple. I think the Titans aren't going to make them. And instead, it's going to be represented by the Texans because they are doing phenomenal things with D'Amico Ryans and C.J. Stroud. But anyways, back to the Titans. I will talk about how Brian Callahan can make this team really spectacular. And by doing that, he's just going to be that guy at the end of the day to coach him up and lead Will Levis to a pretty good second year. And from what I've seen all over my news feeds on Twitter and Instagram, I mean, it sounds like they're doing pretty good in his first year. And how that translates to the regular season, we have no idea yet till we get to preseason training camp. It's going to be an interesting season for the Titans. And I think that if you really think that they're going to go to the playoffs, no, it's not going to happen. I'm here to say this right now. They're not going to make the playoffs. But Will Levis can have a really good second year. And, because he does have a really good receiving core. They got D-Hop, Tyler Boyd, Traylon Burks, Calvin Ridley, not to mention tight ends Jha'quan and Josh Wiley. I think some things that Will Levis can improve on are some of the throwing motions he's had. He's had an up and down year. I mean, he's only played for 7 games. Can't really judge him off of 7 games because he's basically the future of our franchise. And what he does is pretty remarkable. If you ever saw the ever so shifting Miami Dolphins game on Monday Night Football, which they play them again on week 4, I want to say. Yeah, week 4, they play them on Monday Night Football again, which is kind of weird if you think about it. They have a bye week 5, which I think is one of the worst things ever. An early bye is so bad for the Titans because they're going to have to play 13 weeks straight with no breaks. But Will Levis could show up for every game and be remarkable. And he could theoretically sneak him into the playoffs. Now, I said earlier that I think you're delusional if you think this team's going to make the playoffs. I mean, will it happen? Probably not. But they could sneakily be a wild card team. Don't count out the Titans just yet, because a lot of boards have been saying that they're one of the worst teams ever. By the way, that's just an insult. I don't think they're one of the worst teams ever. But how can you rank the Titans at 28, 29, 30 when you've got teams like the Broncos or even the Giants, or there's a lot worse teams out there than the Titans. Trust me. So, if Brian Callahan can do really good his first year, which is what every Titans fan in the world wants, they want Brian Callahan to do good his first year. They really got to meet the benchmark of at least 7 wins, and that's just going to come over time. There's going to be injuries. There's going to be injuries that's going to happen, which are going to be detrimental to the Titans. There's going to be a bad injury. It's also going to be the first year without Derrick Henry. And to be honest, their running back room is kind of decent, even without a superstar like Derrick Henry, who's now in Baltimore, which, best of luck, King. And thank you for your time. Seriously, Derrick, you've had a great 8 years here, and you're always welcome to come back. I doubt he wants to come back, but I'm sure he wanted to. But I think the backfield now with Tajay Spears and Tony Pollard is going to be pretty fun to watch. It's going to be more of a pass offense than in previous years where we've been strictly run because we've had DeMarco Murray and Derrick Henry. We've had DeMarco Murray, Derrick Henry, a little bit a dash of Darrington Evans. But I think we've really found our place with Tajay Spears. And signing Tony Pollard was pretty good on Rand's part, too. So, now our history usually is just ground and pound. Nothing's going to stop these running backs. And for the most part, we've had pretty decent running backs the past few years. Obviously, we're going to have a first year without Derrick Henry, which is kind of going to be sad. But also, it's going to be interesting to see Spears and Pollard in the backfield to, help with running. And I think Tajay Spears is going to be a really good running back in this league. He showed last year that he could really get shifty and turn on a second gear. And, if he keeps his pace going, he could well over have 1,000 yards rushing. And heck, he might even have a few hundred yards receiving. But that's not my main concern. My main concern with Titans is truly Will Levis. And how well are you going to get him each and every Sunday? Because every Sunday is different. You're going to have a different opponent to game plan against. You're going to have a different team you're going to have to go after. But how is Will Levis going to adapt to the pressure from everything? From, I think his second year is going to really depend on how well, his receiver core is, which is one of the best in the league, chef's kiss, mwah. And he really has a good chance to reach 3,000 yards, which I think he'll reach over 3,000 yards. Yes, the concern for Will Levis is his age, because he is 24, which is kind of old for a second-year quarterback. But besides the point, he's basically the future of our whole division. The AFC South is, I think it's slowly becoming one of the better divisions. That might be an unpopular opinion, but it's slowly becoming one of the better divisions because each team is very competitive. The Colts are going to be really something to watch for because the Colts have been up and down the past few years, but they're going to have Anthony Richardson back, and he's going to do just fine, I think. The Jags with Trevor Lawrence, they just signed him to a 5-year, $250 million deal the other week, which is kind of insane. That's a big contract for someone that it's only one playoff game. And to be honest, the Texans are going to win the South. I'm going to say it right now. Say it clear. The Texans are going to win the Texans are going to win the AFC South for 2024. Mark my words. And, the Texans getting Stephon Diggs was probably the biggest acquisition in free agency. And the minute that trade went down, I was in shock. I was like, wow, the Texans are really trying to compete. And they got all the pieces, pretty much. They have a really good defense, really good offense, and they're led by an incredible coach in D'Amico Ryans. So, props to the Texans. So, that begs me the question, what's the Titans' record going to be? Because their schedule is pretty interesting. I'll be discussing that in one moment. Now, the 2024 schedule for the Titans is Sunday, September 8th at Chicago, September 15th versus home, the New York Jets, September 22nd, home against the Green Bay Packers, Monday, September 30th at Miami, Monday Night Football game, which is the only primetime game that they have on their schedule, which is kind of going to make me a little bit mad because I think they need more than one primetime game, but I don't make the schedule. Week 5, they have a bye. That's terrible. They really should. Yeah, like I said, I don't make the schedule, but I don't like the way it's so early, and I mentioned earlier, you're going to have to play 13 weeks straight, and that's going to be really tough for the Titans. Then they play the Indianapolis Colts, their first divisional game, at home, and then it's at Buffalo, at Detroit, home against New England, at LA Chargers, home against the Vikings, at the Houston Texans, at the Washington Commanders, home against the Jaguars, home against the Bengals, at Indianapolis, at Jacksonville, home against the Houston Texans to close it out. They play they play every divisional opponent in their last 5 games. Can you believe that? That is kind of insane when you think about it, because the only team that's not the Colts, Jags, or Texans in that 5-game stretch in December is the Bengals. So this schedule is very iffy. I think they're going to go 8-9, and where I come about that conclusion is, you're going to take advantage of some of these early games, which I think they'll beat the Bears, Packers, maybe beat the Colts at home. They can beat the Lions on the road. They can beat the Patriots at home. They can beat the Chargers. They can beat the Vikings. With no Kirk Cousins, by the way. They can sneak one from the Jags and the Texans, but they'll split with the Colts. They could beat the Commanders. They'll lose the Bengals, but 8-9 is my final prediction for the whole schedule. Finishing in, would that be 3rd place? 2nd or 3rd place for the Titans in the AFC South. Yeah. So, I think what you got to realize is that a second-year player, this goes for all teams, or a lot of teams that have second-year players, your second year is what basically is going to structure your entire career. And the minute Will Levis gets his go, against the Bears, which I think they'll win their home game. That's not a home game, it's in Chicago. But they'll win their inaugural game in Chicago. They'll beat Caleb Williams and Keenan Allen and that whole core there in Chicago, which I think they're going to do all right in the NFC North, but still you got to contend with the Packers, Vikings, and the Lions. So that's going to be pretty tough for the Bears. I would like to also discuss a little bit about our defense, and one of the best things even our offseason was the L'Jarius Sneed trade. I think it's one of the smartest things this offseason. Trading for an all-star cornerback like L'Jarius Sneed was very much needed, because the cornerback room was a little iffy going into free agency, and how we addressed that perfectly was trading for someone like L'Jarius Sneed, who even made that knockout in the AFC Championship game, which we all remember. It was perfect. Seriously. Down to the detail. So, that really discusses the 2024, where we're going to be headed towards. I think we'll do pretty good overall. Brian Callahan, it's his first year. Who knows? And with any head coach in their first year, you're going to have to make that shot of, oh, okay, he's not actually as bad as we might think. But then again, it's year one, and if you make a judgment after year one about your head coach, there's a little bit to do with that. But you just got to realize that Callahan has his own journey of how he got there. He deserves the job, and he's going to rebuild what the Titans are becoming. And right now, the Titans are kind of in that rebuilding phase of just getting past Derrick Henry and opening their options to new players, new coaches, new opportunities. And heck, before I know it, their stadium is going to be done. Their new stadium, which is famously called New Nissan Stadium. But they're still going to be playing at Nissan Stadium until further notice. As I think about how we're going to do as a whole, we'll do just fine. 8-9, that's pretty good for a first-year head coach. Granted, it is Brian Callahan's first year, so it's going to be tough sledding. Plus, you're going to get one full year of Will Levis, and each week I'll get to see how well he's going to do and how he's going to continue to improve over time, because that's all you can do with time, is continue to improve and embrace the improvement. With that, I would be sending you guys right now for an outro. It's the last 5 minutes of the podcast of Sports Digest. Thank you all for your time, for listening to this, wherever you may be, whenever you may be. I hope you have a wonderful day, and know that you all will mean a lot to me in the coming days, and I look forward to the future of how the Titans are going to do, and I'm making the point to where it's something to look forward to, just like in sports, where your favorite team is going to do something that's going to be questionable, but it's going to be okay. You know, every sport is like that. Basketball, football, hockey, you know, you could watch baseball, and some teams can just do stupid stuff. But to the point, I just covered the 2024 NFL Draft and how the Titans should really go about Will Levis' second year, because his second year is going to determine so much more things than what I can even comprehend. Because what it means to be a fan of a team after what they've been through for so many years is that you got to put more faith into the team and believe in the team yourself, believe in yourself, believe in everything that your team is going to do, because eventually your favorite team's going to win that championship, win that Lombardi trophy, and bring it home. Thank you all for your time and listening to Sports Digest. I hope each and every one of you enjoy this, because this is the first episode I've ever made, and right now I'm approaching on 1 hour. I figured the hour-long timestamp would be a great starting point, but I could shorten it, but oh well. I think 1 hour is a perfect place to call it a stop. So, if you have any questions, you can follow me on Instagram at Titans Daily, and that's spelled Titi. Yeah, let me rephrase that. You can follow me at Titans Daily at Titanz Daily, and that's where you can find some Titans news. And just have a great day. Thank you all for listening, and enjoy the rest of your day.